This is the official EFL Podcast.
Hello again and welcome to the official EFL Podcast, previewing and reviewing the best of the match action across the EFL and its competitions. Well, there's only one place for us to look this week, and that is at the Sky Bet playoffs. A few fascinating weeks in store, of course. Drama is guaranteed. To look ahead to all the fixtures are Sky Sports pundits Andy Hinchcliffe and Don Goodman. First of all, guys, looking at the Championship, and we could really not have asked for a better playoff campaign than this, can we? With how the games have fallen, Andy. Some huge football clubs involved, isn't there?
I think it's a brilliant playoff foursome, with all due respect to the other teams that are in the mix, Bristol City, Middlesbrough. I think we've got the four teams that really deserve to be there. I think all play really good attacking football. We've got huge clubs, famous histories. I think the semi-finals look really tasty. And, of course, any final we get is going to be an absolute cracker. So, you know, in terms of the neutral watching on, this is arguably the biggest set of semi-finals and arguably the biggest final we're ever going to get in kind of Championship playoff history. So it's amazing. Yeah,
Don, some massive football clubs in there with some big support behind them. These games, well, they looked all to be going to be sellout games, don't they, as well?
Yeah, I think as Andy's already alluded to, they are four enormous clubs that are all desperate to get back into the Premier League. I mean, they all have good, large fan bases. So I am expecting real excitement in all the games, home and away, and in the final. And like Hinchy just alluded to, I don't think it really matters as a neutral which final you get. I think it will be an exciting time.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we'll look at Villa against West Brom, and a huge game this, of course. You're at both legs rather. How much more does it add to the appetite for this match that it is a derby as well as a playoff semi-final?
Well, I think the derby angle certainly adds spice. It's, again, another reason for neutrals to tune in as well. But we've got the derby angle. Of course, I think Villa will want revenge as well. If you remember that hand of J-Rod goal that we got at the Hawthorns that helped the West Brom to a 2-2 draw. So that will play on Villa minds as well. But ultimately, we've got two sides that very definitely play on the front foot. There's apparently 292 goals in Villa and West Brom's Championship games this season, which is incredible. So I think we've got a right to expect a few more in the next couple of games as well.
Yeah, for Villa, what will last year's experience of reaching that playoff final do for those players that lost out to Fulham that time? What will that experience do for them, do you believe?
Well, I think any playoff experience and the experience of a showpiece final, it certainly helps. You kind of know what's going to be coming. You know what pressure you'll be under. But for Villa, I think Leeds or Derby, if they were to get to the final they're not as good as Fulham were last season. And this is a very different Aston Villa team as well. I think Dean Smith has brought an energy, an intensity, an organisation that was missing last season. Dean's also got individuals in great form as well. Tyrone Mings, Jack Grealish, John McGinn in particular. So I just think the Villa are in much better kind of all-round shape this season than last season to get promoted.
Yeah, and looking at West Brom, is it fair to say that, since Darren Moore was sacked, not much has really changed, has it, under James Shannon? It's the same sort of system that they're going for as well?
Yeah, I think whether it be in Darren or Jimmy in charge, there's always kind of the open attacking football that they want to play. In fact, this season, they've won 23 games. Only 2 of them were by a 0-0. So they're very open in the way that they approach games. But actually, Jimmy has changed the system in the last 5 games. His first 5 games, he played 4-3-3. The last 5, he switched to 3 at the back. And I think it does probably suit his personnel a bit more, gives them a bit more defensive stability. But regardless of the formation they play against Aston Villa, whether it be a back 4 or a back 3, they will go out to win both games because that's their style.
You're looking at Villa again. I mean, they've been in excellent form recently, but they haven't actually beaten a side who have finished above them all season. Is that something that can give West Brom, that psychological advantage, you believe?
Well, I'm sure that's maybe a particular stat that Dean Smith is keeping very quiet, doesn't want his players to know about. I'm sure they'll be aware of it. But ultimately, you look at Villa, they've won 10 of the last 12 games. They're clearly banging form. And it's all about beating the top sides now in the playoffs. And Villa, as I said before, they are currently in the best shape they've been this season to do that. So the regular season games are what they are. You learn lessons from that. But it's the form that Villa are in, the type of team that Villa are now, that's why people are tipping them as favourites to get to the final and get to the Premier League. It's because of that incredible run of form we've seen for the last 12 games.
And going back to James Shan, does he have extra motivation for this playoff campaign? Because surely if West Brom do go up, he gets the job.
Yeah, I'm sure he's firstly thinking about the club going up and not necessarily about himself. But coaches' jobs these days really are at a premium. So he'll hope the playoffs aren't his last hurrah if they miss out or if they go up, because West Brom, of course, may go for a bigger name next season, regardless of the league that they play in. So it's really hard to work out exactly what's going to happen. Jimmy Shan getting West Brom to the Premier League is no guarantee that he'll stay in the job. We've seen what's happened in the past with managers, coaches like Neil Warnock. It can change a club's mentality depending on the league they're in. But he's kind of took over. People expected him to be a bit of a stopgap. He's done a good job. Of course, they were always going to be in the playoffs, probably West Brom, but he's going to be judged on what happens now. The problem is he's up against a banging form Villa side, which you probably wouldn't want to be at this stage.
Yeah, it should be a full house as well at Villa Park. How important is it that Dean Smith's side have an advantage going into the second leg with that support behind them?
Well, I think the way that Villa are playing, they're a danger home or away, and they'll, like West Brom, will look to genuinely win both games. I think sometimes, say they had a 2-goal first leg lead, it can look great on paper, but sometimes complacency can creep in, and then things can fall apart in that second game. So it's getting a plan over the 2 games, and that's what's so unusual about the playoffs. It's nothing like the regular season, not a one-off game, it's 2 games. So sometimes a lead from the first leg is not all it's cracked up to be. So I think Dean, regardless of what happens in that first leg, if they're 5 or 6-0 up, of course, it's a different story. But even if they were to draw that first game, with the way that they're playing and the way that West Brom play, it will always give Villa a chance. So I don't think he'd be too concerned about the result unless they get hammered. But I just don't see that happening either. So, yeah, he'll be very balanced in his view. It's not all about the game at Villa Park. With it being over 2 games, he'll plan to get the job done over 2 matches.
Yeah, another fierce match at Derby with Leeds coming to town this weekend as well, Don. How much confidence will Derby have going into this match after securing their place in the playoffs last weekend?
Well, I mean, it was a perfect practice for them, wasn't it? Having to beat West Bromwich Albion in the final game of the season to secure a playoff spot. They had to cope with extreme pressure. They had to produce. And they did, and so I think of all the teams, that particular game was absolutely perfect practice for Derby County. I mean, obviously they're up against a Leeds team that have beaten them quite convincingly on both occasions, but it seems to be a very different beat at the moment. I mean, if you'd have asked me this question 2 or 3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have hesitated to say that I felt Leeds United would be just too strong and too good for Derby County, but just the results, no win in the final 4 for Leeds. They've lost against Wigan and already relegated Ipswich. They seem to need sort of 10 or more chances to score a goal. And that is a real worry. The fact that they've only scored 4 goals in the last 4 games. If you have a look at the number of attempts, I mean, they had 27 attempts against Ipswich. Ipswich had 6, 3 on target and scored with all 3 again. So all the signs are just a little bit concerning now. I wasn't overly concerned a couple of weeks ago because although they might have been losing the odd game, for me they were still playing very, very well, and actually maybe a little bit unfortunate to lose some of the games that they'd lost. But now the way they've finished the season just has me a little bit worried for Leeds United.
Yeah, Andy, I mean, you were at the match last week for Derby against West Brom. Will going into the match off the back of a must-win like that, will that have prepared them in the right way for this match, for the playoff campaign?
Well, it certainly doesn't do them any harm. You've got to remember they've only lost 1 of the last 12 games anyway, so they're already feeling pretty good about themselves before they took on West Brom. But there's nothing better than winning pressurised games, because that's what the playoffs are all about. At 1-1 against West Brom, things looked a little bit dodgy for them, but they showed real character and quality to push on and deservedly win. I just think there's kind of a youthful exuberance and fearlessness about Derby that could easily carry them to the final. So I know Leeds have done well against them in the regular season games, but with that confidence of the run that they're on, beating West Brom in the way that they did, the crowd behind them as well, it's going to be a real test for Leeds.
Yeah, Don, you sort of touched on it earlier. Leeds didn't really have much to play for last week, but of course they lost against Ipswich, a team that were already relegated. Should we read too much into that result?
Well, I think given the team selection, Marcelo Bielsa put, I think it was a game that he set out to win. I mean, obviously he set out to win every game, but he could easily have rested players and put some of the youngsters, a lot more of the youngsters in, but he went very, very strong. And like I said, Ipswich only had 3 shots on target and scored 3 goals. So I'm sure he would have been scratching his head as to how his team had lost that game at the final whistle. But like I said, despite the fact that their fate was already sealed, what concerns me is the amount of chances that they're missing, and I mean good chances as well. And actually, over the last 4 games, they've started conceding a little few more goals at a higher rate, a quicker rate than they were previously. They still have one of the best defensive records in the league, but they conceded 8 goals in those last 4 games. So, there were just 1 or 2 little signs that just have alarm bells ringing a little bit. The bottom line is, though, they have to try and find positives, because the past is the past. They were the only team out of the other, the 4 teams in the playoffs that had a genuine opportunity over the final 6 or 8 weeks of the season to escape class or get into those automatic places. So they're the only team really that are coming into it, maybe looking back and reflecting, if only we would have, converted some of those chances. So they've got to draw a line under it and consign it to history, because that's what it is. It is history. Now I'd be focusing on the fact that on their day, they are the best of the 4 teams. I have got absolutely no hesitation in saying that. And they've got to focus on the fact that if they can prevail, actually winning a playoff is a more enjoyable way of getting promotion. Certainly more stress and more pressure, but if you actually are the team that prevails, it is the best way to gain promotion. So I'd be focusing on all the positives if I were Leeds United.
Yeah, Andy, Don saying Leeds should focus on the positives. I mean, they have beaten Derby twice this season, and they have beaten Aston Villa and West Brom as well. How much will they use that as motivation going into this match?
Well, winning games is always going to give you confidence, and that's what Leeds will surely have. But Derby simply couldn't cope with Leeds' intensity in both those regular season games. But now Derby, of course, are 4-1. Frank Lampard, I'm sure, will be busy formulating a game plan to cope with Leeds' high-energy game much better than Derby did in those 2 regular season games. And, of course, Derby are in good form and in good mood as well. So it won't be straightforward for Leeds. It looks like Kemar Roof is going to probably play in the first game with Patrick Bamford suspended. That, I feel, will help Leeds an awful lot as well. But it's sometimes the law of averages say, well, you won those 2 regular season games relatively easily, played really well. Is it going to be the same in the playoffs? It very rarely is. Of course, the pressures are great. The crowds are going to be enormous for those 2 games as well, be really passionate. So the whole landscape has changed. So we shouldn't really read too much into those regular season games. If Leeds turn up and play with the intensity they played with before, then Derby have a job on containing them.
Yeah, Don, looking at both managers now, neither have experience of the playoffs, but obviously have big game experience. Is that a disadvantage, though, not having that experience in the playoffs?
No, I don't think so. I think they are both unbelievably experienced in footballing terms. The fact that they haven't experienced the playoffs, I'm sure everybody's well aware of what the playoffs are, and form can go out the window and you can get strange results. But I think these will be 2 individuals that will be drawing on every ounce of the experiences they've had within football in order to prepare their teams for what is surely going to be one heck of a ding-dong battle.
Yeah, Andy, Bielsa has previously got a history of his teams burning out towards the end of the season. With recent results, you can't blame sort of like people using that sort of comparison. Is that what we've seen this season, do you believe, from Leeds? And if so, is that obviously is a massive worry for the playoffs?
Well, when you look at Leeds' recent results, I think it can be a kind of a somewhat lazy assumption that they are running out of steam. But if you look at their underlying performances and look at their running stats, they're as energetic as ever. They're running as strong as ever. So it isn't really that bad, even though the results haven't gone for them. They aren't running out of steam. Some of the games have gone against them. They've made mistakes. that happens in football. But yeah, this I think at the start of the season we were talking about, well, could Leeds kind of see the season out playing with this high energy game plan, and they comfortably have. And of course, okay, they missed out on finishing in the top two. Psychologically, you take a bit of a knock from that. But Bielsa's been around long enough. He's a master at getting his players motivated. He will say, look, we're running as strong as ever. I'll show you all the stats to back that up. Don't worry about it. We stick to the game plan that was there from day one. So, yeah, if Derby think that Leeds are tiring, they need to think again.
Yeah, Don, and for Frank Lampard, is his season defined on these games? Obviously, there's a weight of expectation, obviously like there is on Leeds, but there is a real weight of expectation on Frank Lampard's shoulders, isn't there?
There is, but that's because he is a very, very high-profile individual. That's because Derby County are a massive club in the Championship that are desperate to get back into the Premier League. But not for a second do I think that anybody can judge him in a negative sense. If Derby County fail, they are the underdogs, there is no question. But when I analyse what he had to do, so I covered Derby's playoff games against Fulham last season, home and away in the playoffs, and they were totally dominated by Fulham. They were a very aged squad. They got overrun. They couldn't match Fulham's energy. They didn't have the legs. So I think Frank Lampard will have probably come into the football club, probably watched an awful lot of the games on tape, and made the assertion that, you know, they really did need to get more legs and more energy into the team and play a different style of football. And that is precisely what he's done. So I think no matter what happens in the playoffs, I think Frank Lampard's first season as a coach can only be described as excellent. You know, he's changed the squad around. He's brought a lot of youth in, used his contacts to get really, really good loan players in, and got Derby County into the top six. So I think he has been absolutely excellent, and I'm sure it will have only served to whet his appetite to want to continue in coaching and actually get to the very, very top of the tree.
Yeah, now we've gone to League One, and two other huge football clubs hoping to get to the final at Wembley, Don, in Sunderland taking on Portsmouth. The first leg, of course, could be, you know, the biggest crowd in the playoffs throughout the entire competitions. I mean, how much of a big game feel does this one have?
Well, it has enormous. You have to look at the EFL Trophy final and the crowd, over 85,000 in Wembley for what in effect was a third-tier English League game. I mean, it is quite remarkable. And obviously, Sunderland, the Stadium of Light will be full. And that huge crowd will have huge expectations, and that can either work for Sunderland or against Sunderland. So if you're Portsmouth, you will want to quieten the crowd. You will want to take the sting out of any momentum Sunderland try and build up. And if you can do that, then, you know, you can turn that enormous crowd to your advantage as the away team. But both will be disappointed. Both have gone into the playoffs when, with 3 games to go, both of their destinies were in their own hands. Obviously, they met at the Stadium of Light. It was a 1-1 draw, which really was the perfect outcome for Barnsley, who went on and took advantage of it. So, you know, they'll have to get over the disappointment of the fact that they didn't get promoted automatically and, you know, concentrate on the prize in hand, which is to get themselves, either of them, they both will have the same focus, back into the Championship, because they are the size of the clubs. That is where they, at the absolute minimum, will be wanting to play their trade.
How difficult is it to get over a disappointment like that, though? With, you know, at one point, like you mentioned there, both sides, you know, realistically had their own destinies in their hands in terms of securing that final automatic promotion spot.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I'm not going to dress it up and pretend that it's not. And so it's all going to come down to the mental strength of both camps, both sets of players, both coaches. You know, can the coaches draw a line in the sand over the league campaign, and can they get them mentally focused and give them the self-belief that they have the ability to win what is going to be a really difficult playoff. I honestly believe the top 5 in League One are possibly the strongest that there has ever been in terms of ability, in terms of teams, in terms of, you know, every aspect of the game. You know, the 5 of them have been simply magnificent. And I think that those 5 have clearly been better than any of the other teams. So, make no bones about it. Whoever prevails is going to have to play fantastic football and is going to thoroughly deserve it at the end of it. They're going to have to work for it, whoever's going to win these League One playoffs.
And of course, like we mentioned earlier, this is a repeat of that EFL Trophy final. Will that match be in both these teams' minds going into this one? And will that give Portsmouth the psychological advantage maybe going into both legs?
I don't think so. I think realistically, from a footballing perspective, you've got to analyse that game. And, at the end of 90 minutes, they were drawing. And at the end of extra time, they were drawing. And I think that is an indicator, plus the 1-1 draw at the Stadium of Light the week before last. I think that's an indicator that there really isn't that much between these two teams. And it is going to be who gets the rub of the green, who's a bit more ruthless in front of goal when the chances come their way, who can hold their nerve. I don't think that either of them will be able to focus on the EFL Trophy final and say that it gives them any advantage or disadvantage, because they really weren't separated other than by penalties at the end of the day. So, I guess really you could analyse the game and break it down, and I feel that Sunderland have had their moments both at Wembley and at the Stadium of Light, and certainly Portsmouth had their moments. So, this really is an almost impossible task in deciding which one of them is the favourites and which one of them will come through this time.
And we sort of touched on this, but when you are playing for a big club like Portsmouth or Sunderland in a division which fans don't expect them to be playing at, how much does that increase the pressure going into games like this?
Well, I think the depth of despair that both sets of fans in recent times have suffered, I think will, make them realise that they are a long way from rock bottom, which they have found themselves in recent times. Portsmouth, obviously, all the way down to the bottom league. Sunderland, 2 relegations from the Premier League and then again from the Championship League. But I do think that the fans have recognised what a mess both clubs have been in. If we focus on Sunderland, I don't think morale could possibly have been any lower at the end of last season when they got relegated. So I think you've got to give credit to Jack Ross, and I think that his efforts will be recognised by the supporters. I think he will be backed by the fans, but make no mistake, it's a big, big game. Neither of these clubs will feel that they belong in League One, and both will be desperate, to win these playoffs. But getting back to your point, it can be difficult, certainly for players that are used to playing at a higher level. And now, you're at that scenario, aren't you, where it's cometh the hour, cometh the man. And I spoke about the mentalities of both sets of players, and I'm fascinated to see who's going to cope with the pressures of getting such a big club back into the Championship over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, Andy, now going on to Doncaster against Charlton, again with a different sort of flavour this one to Portsmouth against Sunderland. Doncaster have clung on to that final playoffs place. Is the pressure off them in this playoff campaign, do you believe, with the fact that there is so much pressure on the likes of Charlton, Portsmouth and Sunderland?
Absolutely, the pressure is off. They finished 6th. They were 12 points behind Sunderland in 5th. That really shows the gulf between themselves and the other sides. And of course, Charlton claiming 3rd place means that Doncaster have probably got the toughest possible semi-final against the League One's informed sides. But the good news is that, they are definite underdogs. They can relax. No one really expects them to get through. They've got 21-goal John Marquis as well. So there's always hope. He scored in his last 2 games. So it would be a surprise, definitely, if Doncaster were to get past Charlton. But this is the playoffs and it can happen.
Yeah, Don, of course, you mentioned it before on this podcast that Charlton have been the form team in the division. How much confidence will they have going into this one based on that form, in the end finishing 3rd ahead of both Portsmouth and Sunderland?
Yeah, I think if you can't have confidence when you've won 7 of the final 8 games, going into that, then you'll never have confidence. They've literally got every aspect of their team right. 7 clean sheets in the last 9. In the last 9 games, they've conceded 3 goals. So teams really are finding it hard to break Charlton down. And of course, the other way, they carry an enormous threat going forward. Their goals output has increased and just got better and better as the season has gone on. And you've got to remind yourself that Lee Bowyer lost his top scorer to Huddersfield Town in Carl Grant in the January window. So that just magnifies what a brilliant job he has done. But you're right, Doncaster, they have drawn the short straw. It is going to be a tough ask. But I guess really, if you're Doncaster, you'll focus on Charlton's playoff campaign last season when they were against Shrewsbury Town. I think most people would have fancied Charlton Athletic to overcome Shrewsbury Town. They failed to do that, and Doncaster Rovers have certainly got a fighting chance.
Yeah, Andy, Don's mentioned it there in terms of the job that Lee Bowyer has done with Charlton. Does he have to be wary of overconfidence, though, maybe? Because there was that 15-point gap between these two teams that they maybe could underestimate Doncaster.
Yeah, and also you've got to remember they've only lost 2 of the last 21 games. So as players, you inevitably feel invincible. And that's why I think Lee has to work really hard to ensure that confidence doesn't spill over into arrogance, because that's when surprises can occur. And it's what Doncaster really need to happen if they are to get to the final. They need to play out of their skins themselves and hope that Charlton already thinking of Wembley and kind of put the cart before the horse. So this is what can happen when you're in such great form. You go into the playoffs and you think, well, it's just a foregone conclusion. Look at Doncaster. Look at how far behind us they finished, and it's going to be straightforward. If you start thinking that way, no matter what form you've been in, you can come unstuck. Because we talked about the underdog tag. They'll certainly be at it, and they've got absolutely nothing to lose. And Charlton have got everything to lose.
Yeah, Don, is that the motivation for Doncaster rather than that they are the underdog? A tag, obviously, which suited them so well when they beat Leeds in the League One playoff final 11 years ago, of course.
Yeah, you use every ounce of anything that can provide extra motivation. I mean, they haven't ended the season too shabby themselves, Doncaster Rovers, and they were being chased down by Peterborough. They've withstood that challenge, and in order to do that, they've had to play well at the back end of the season. So, they won 5 of the final 8 games. They only lost a couple. The one thing that concerns me about Doncaster's potential to upset the apple cart is their record against those 5 teams above them. They've only managed to win one of those games, and that was against Luton back in September. So they are up against it. Obviously, they're not going to be focusing on that statistic that I've just rattled off. They'll be focusing on the fact that they're feeling good about themselves. They do have good players. The pair of you have already mentioned John Marquis and James Coppinger. And on their day, and that's what it has to be for Doncaster Rovers, they have to focus one game at a time. The job in hand in the first leg is, can they beat Charlton Athletic? The answer is, on any given day, yes, they can. And that's what they've got to focus on. And if they can beat them in the first leg and take an advantage back to the Valley, then you just never know.
Yeah, now moving on to League Two, and another game with a similar sort of feel to it, Andy, in Newport against Mansfield. Should Newport themselves thrive on the underdog mentality as well as like Doncaster have done?
Well, you say underdog, but if you look at actually the stats, there's only 5 points that separate Newport and Mansfield in that final League Two table. Newport are unbeaten in the last 10. They've won 6 of those 10 games. Jamil Matt scored 3 goals in his last 4. Mansfield have lost their last 3. So, yeah, we can probably say they're underdogs if you look at the league table and think that's the case. But they're not to be underestimated. I do feel they're underdogs with real bite.
Real bite indeed. Don, both you and Andy called it last week, actually, to say that having home advantage will give MK Dons the edge in that match between them and Mansfield. Is this the perfect time for Newport as well, but based on that form that they're going into the playoffs in, to take advantage of a team which could be still licking their wounds?
Well, it has to be. I mean, there's no question of Mansfield being anything other than devastated after that defeat against MK Dons last week. I mean, to lose your last 3 games and only miss out by 3 points is a real devastating feeling, and it is a contrasting emotion to which Newport County are going to come into this game. Hinch has already alluded to the fact that they're unbeaten in 10. They have to go on this fantastic run in order just to secure a spot. Now, they've managed to do it, and actually, I think of the teams coming into the playoffs, they are in the best form. So it isn't one of those situations where you can say, well, they finished 7th and they finished 4th, so, the team finishing 7th is going to be the underdog. I just don't think at this level that can be portrayed as that situation. These, again, are 4 very, very evenly matched teams. And it's quite ironic that the teams directly above Newport, Mansfield have lost their last 3, Forest Green have lost 1 and drawn 1 of the last 2, and Tranmere Rovers come in on the back of 4 games without a win. So it's clear that Newport County will come in full of confidence and in the most confident mood.
Yeah, and it's going on to that final playoff game, which, of course, you're covering, Don. I mean, a more evenly matched game in terms of the table, of course, but both sides had a shot at automatic promotion at one point and missed out. Forest Green won at Tranmere only last month. Again, is that a psychological advantage for a team going into the playoffs?
It could be. To go away and recently and beat a team that, when they met were playing well. Tranmere were in fine form when Forest Green went there. So, that is certainly a result and a performance that they can use to their advantage. I kind of look at the last half a dozen games that Tranmere Rovers had to play, and they've had it really tough. I mean, it's an incredible tough end to the season. They have to play Newport. We just alluded to that game. They have to play MK Dons. They have to play Forest Green. We just alluded to that game. They have to play Lincoln and Bury. Those were 5 of the last 6 games that they had to play. So on the one end of it, you can look at it and say, well, it's good practice. They've been involved in tough games. On the flip side of that is, they haven't managed to finish the season overly strongly. They've only managed to win 1 of the last 6 games. So, like I said, it's all about mentalities. And as a coach, it's the coach's job to convince the players that they have the tools to get the job done, despite, the disappointment of not clinching automatic promotion. So, this is a tight one to call, really. Certainly, as we're saying, Newport are coming into it in the best form of all of them. The irony is that they're the ones that have finished lower than the rest. It is going to be a fascinating battle between all 4 of them.
Yeah, Andy, Don's mentioned it there in terms of the form of the sides going into this. Tranmere, of course, go into the match with only 1 win in the last 7. A tough ask for them based on that form, isn't it?
It's that conundrum really with the playoffs. Sometimes this happens. You normally just expect all the playoff sides in any division to be in great form because they're in the playoffs, but it's not always the case. They can be up there and then the form's indifferent towards the end of the season. It's just sometimes that can work in your favour. As you see with Villa in the Championship, they go into it in a fabulous run of form. Tranmere go into this having won 1 of the last 7. Now, it does not necessarily mean that Villa are going to do well and Tranmere aren't. It's just really getting your head round the kind of the format of the semi-finals and the final, and just working out a way of getting the job done in these games. That's what's so amazing about the playoffs. It's nothing like the season that you've just had before, and teams that aren't in good form can surprise the opposition in the semi-finals and go on to get promoted. And then people say, hang on a minute, they only won 1 game of the final 7 before they went into the playoffs. Doesn't matter. It's all about getting your heads right as a coach, as a club, and as players, of course, into kind of setting your stall out and getting the job done in the playoffs. And it's incredible. We see these stories all the time with teams not in great form, but just seem to make it happen or kind of get it all together for the playoffs. And Tranmere could easily be that team.
Yeah, they certainly could. And there's one thing that's guaranteed in the playoffs, and that's drama. Andy, Don, thank you very much for your time once again. That's it from us. Join us again next time. Thanks for tuning in.
The official EFL Podcast. The best reaction to all the match action. Available every week.